The screen door hit the frame so hard the glass rattled in its pain. I felt my daughter's small hand rip out of mine before I understood why. 1 second she was beside me in her yellow party dress, and the next she was stumbling backward down the porch steps, catching herself on the railing, her paper birthday hat crushed in her fist. I heard the click of the lock turn from the inside. Through the frosted glass I could see a shape standing there, arms crossed, not moving. Not even a shadow of hesitation. "She doesn't belong in here," the voice said, muffled but unmistakable. "Not anymore." I stood on those steps in the cold, my daughter's fingers tightening around mine again, and I made myself a promise before I even turned around to look at that door. I was going to make her regret every word of that sentence. My name is Renee Calloway. I'm 34 years old, and by the time all of this happened I had spent 11 years building something out of nothing. I started Calloway and Finch Interiors in a spare bedroom with $4,200 in savings, and a laptop that overheated if I ran 2 programs at once. By the time my daughter Maddie turned 7, the firm had 18 employees, a client list that included 2 hotel chains, and revenue that had crossed $3.1 million the year before. I wasn't rich the way people picture rich. I was stable. I was the kind of stable my own mother never got to be, the kind you build with your hands over a decade of nights you don't talk about. I married my husband, Ethan, 9 years ago. He's an aerospace engineer, steady, quiet, the kind of man who reads the fine print on everything, including, it turned out, his own family. His mother, Deborah Calloway, had never once used my first name in 9 years of marriage. It was always Ethan's wife. Sometimes, when she thought I couldn't hear, it was something worse. That night, Maddie's 7th birthday party, hosted at Deborah's house because Ethan had insisted it would mean a lot to her, was the night I stopped pretending the tension in that family was just personality. It was the night I found out exactly how much was at stake, and it wasn't just my daughter's feelings. It was $340,000 of my company's money, sitting in an account I didn't know existed until 3 weeks later. The party had 30 kids in the backyard, a rented cotton candy machine, and Deborah in a cream silk blouse that she'd specifically told me over the phone, "Isn't for children's parties, Renee, but I'll make an exception." I watched her hand out juice boxes to every child except Maddie. I told myself it was an oversight. Then I watched her steer the piñata toward the other side of the yard the second Maddie lined up to take her turn, announcing too brightly, "Let's give someone else a chance, sweetheart," while Maddie's cousins, full-blood Callaways, got 2 swings each. Then came the moment I couldn't explain away. Maddie had made Deborah a card. Crayon, glitter glue, the works. She'd spent 4 nights on it. I watched Deborah take it, glance at it for exactly 1 second, and set it down on a side table, face down, under a stack of unopened birthday cards from other people's children. She didn't say thank you. She turned to my sister-in-law, Pam, and I heard her say, in a voice that carried exactly as far as she wanted it to, "It's sweet that she tries." Considering what I wanted to ask. I didn't get the chance. 20 minutes later, Maddie went inside to use the bathroom, and Deborah followed her in. I was refilling a drink cooler outside when I heard the scream, not fear, just startled hurt, and ran up the steps in time to see Maddie stumbling backward out the door, and Deborah's hand still extended from the push. That was the cold open. That was the moment the mask came off. And underneath it I would learn there was so much more than cruelty. I didn't scream at Deborah on that porch. I picked Maddie up, checked her elbow where she'd scraped it on the railing, and I drove home without saying a single word to my mother-in-law. Ethan was furious, but I told him to let me handle it my way. Law didn't win with Deborah. Documentation did. That night, after Maddie was asleep with a cartoon bandage on her elbow, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and started pulling every joint financial document Ethan and I shared with his parents, because 8 years earlier, in a moment of family goodwill I deeply regretted, we'd co-signed a small business loan for Deborah's short-lived event planning company, using our firm's line of credit as collateral. I found the first irregularity within an hour. A transfer of $22,000 from that shared line of credit, dated 6 weeks earlier, memo field blank. I called Deborah the next morning, kept my voice level, and asked her directly about the $22,000. "Oh, that," she said with a laugh that had no humor in it. That's just a bridge draw against the receivables cycle, Renee. Standard cash flow smoothing. My accountant handles all of it. You wouldn't understand the mechanics, but it's fully collateralized against Q3 bookings. It'll self-resolve. It was gibberish dressed up as competence. I said, okay. Thanks for explaining. And hung up. I didn't believe a word of it. I pretended to. 2 days later, I drove to drop off a folding table Deborah had borrowed for the party. Her front door was cracked, and before I knocked I heard her on the phone in the kitchen laughing. She actually bought the cash flow smoothing line, Deborah said. Ethan's wife will believe anything if you use enough big words. Honestly, between us, I don't know what he sees in her. All that money and she still doesn't know how to dress for a dinner party. I stood on that porch for a full 10 seconds before I knocked like I just arrived. The lie about receivables cycles didn't sit right, so I went further. I pulled 6 months of statements instead of 6 weeks. The $22,000 wasn't a one-time draw. It was the fifth in a series: $17,500, $19,000, $22,000, $28,000, and one more 3 days before Maddie's party, for $31,000. Total drawn against our business credit line. $117,500. But that wasn't the worst part. When I cross-referenced the transfer dates against Deborah's own defunct LLC, the event planning company that had closed 2 years earlier, I found the funds weren't going to any business account at all. They were routing through a shell account labeled D. Callaway Consulting straight into a real estate holding company. Deborah wasn't smoothing cash flow. She was quietly financing a $340,000 down payment on a lake house, using our company's collateral, without our knowledge or signature on the newer draws, because I found where she'd forged Ethan's digital signature on 2 of the authorization requests. I brought Ethan into it this time, and we sat across from Deborah and her husband, Richard, at their dining table. I laid out the printouts. Deborah didn't blink. "You're misreading standard leverage structuring," she said, folding her hands like a woman lecturing a child. "Family helps family. I fully intended to true it up before year-end reconciliation. This is exactly the kind of paranoid, small-minded thinking I'd expect from someone who grew up counting pennies." Richard didn't say a word. He just looked at his water glass. I smiled, said I understood, and told them I'd let it go for now. I did not let it go. I made a decision that night, driving home with Ethan silent and seething beside me. If I came at Deborah head-on, she'd lawyer up, shred documents, and burn 6 months getting our own money back through litigation. Money I needed for payroll for a lease renewal for 18 employees who had nothing to do with any of this. So I decided to become someone Deborah already believed I was. Soft, overwhelmed, easy to steer. For 3 weeks I played a part. I started slouching more at family dinners, letting my voice go small and apologetic. I stopped correcting her when she talked over me. When she brought up the forged signatures again, testing me, I let my eyes well up and said, "I just don't understand all the financial stuff, Deborah. I trust you and Ethan to sort it out." I even let her see me fumbling with a printed spreadsheet at one dinner, holding it upside down for a beat too long before catching my mistake with an embarrassed laugh. I watched her posture change toward me in real time. The way a predator relaxes once it decides the thing in front of it isn't a threat. Inside, I was doing something very different. I was quietly transferring signing authority on our line of credit to require dual approval. I was documenting every transaction with timestamps and screenshots stored in 3 separate places. I was talking twice a week to a forensic accountant named Priya Nataraj and a business litigation attorney named Marcus Webb, both of whom I paid out of a personal account Deborah didn't know existed. Playing weak wasn't weakness. It was reconnaissance with a smile on it. The plan was simple, and it hinged on one object: a folding table. The same one I'd returned to Deborah's house weeks earlier. The one that, unknown to her, I'd asked our IT contractor to modify. Inside the folded leg brace sat a small voice-activated recorder, magnetically mounted, battery life of 11 days. Deborah reused that exact table for every family gathering. It was practically her signature piece. The bait itself was a document. I accidentally left a folder at Deborah's house during a visit, a folder containing what looked like a real internal memo from Priya, but was actually a decoy. It stated that our firm was about to undergo a surprise financial audit in 3 weeks due to a routine loan renewal requirement, and that any outstanding irregularities in shared credit lines would be flagged automatically. It was designed to make Deborah panic and either try to cover her tracks or brag about her plan to someone. She did both. For the next 10 days, I checked the recorder's uploaded audio from my phone at odd hours, during client meetings in the school pickup line, once at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. Most of it was nothing. Recipes, Richard's golf complaints, gossip about neighbors. Then 6 days in, my phone buzzed under the conference table during a client call, and I saw the new file flagged by the keyword alert I'd set for Renee and loan. I listened to it in my car afterward, engine off, hands gripping the wheel. It was Deborah on the phone with Richard, laying out a plan to quickly transfer the remaining $91,500 of undrawn credit before the audit, move it into the Lake House closing account, and her words, "Let Ethan's wife play detective for a few more weeks while the money's already spent." What's she going to do, sue her own husband's mother? Ethan won't let it get that far. He never does. I had my bait. I had my confirmation. I had 11 more days of recording left, and I let the table sit exactly where it was. Deborah scheduled a family dinner for the following Saturday, just a small celebration, she said, for the Lake House closing, which she and Richard had decided to announce to the extended family before the paperwork had even fully cleared. 22 people. The same folding table, dressed up with a linen runner, sat against the dining room wall holding the dessert spread. Maddie wasn't invited. Deborah had told Ethan in front of me, "It'll just be adults talking business, and honestly, given everything, I think it's better she's not underfoot." That was the last straw that mattered least. The one that mattered most came 20 minutes into dinner, when Deborah stood, raised her glass, and feeling untouchable, decided to make a toast that included me. "To new beginnings," she said, smiling at the table, "and to family members finally learning their place. Some of us built this family's wealth. Some of us just married into convenient timing." A few people laughed, uncomfortable. Ethan's jaw tightened beside me. I set down my fork. I didn't raise my voice. I never do. I stood up, calmly, and I set my phone in the center of the table, screen facing up, a waveform already playing. "Let Ethan's wife play detective for a few more weeks while the money's already spent." The room went dead silent except for Deborah's own voice looping out of a 4-inch speaker. "I want to thank you for that toast, Deborah," I said quietly, "because it's the last one you're going to give with our money." I laid it out in order the way Priya and Marcus had helped me organize it, not shouting, just stating facts, each one landing heavier than the last. The $117,500 in undocumented draws. The forged authorization signatures, 2 counts, both provable, both federal wire fraud once the funds crossed state lines to the Lake House Holding Company in Wisconsin. The recorded conversation, obtained legally under one-party consent in our state, admissible in both criminal and civil proceedings. The $91,500 in additional funds she'd planned to move within the week, which, I let this land, had already been frozen that morning, because Marcus had filed an emergency injunction the day before, and our bank's fraud division had flagged the account at 9:14 a.m. "There's no bridge draw," I said. "There's no receivables cycle. There's a woman who used her son's marriage as a credit line and pushed a 7-year-old out a door because she was inconvenient to a party she wasn't even supposed to be excluded from." Richard's phone rang. He answered it at the table, went white, and said only, "It's the bank." I picked up the crumpled birthday card, the one Maddie had made, still sitting face down on that side table 3 weeks later, untouched, exactly where Deborah had left it, and I tore it in half, not out of anger, but so Deborah would understand in the clearest possible terms that whatever version of family she thought she still had access to no longer existed. 2 detectives from the County Financial Crimes Unit arrived 40 minutes later. Deborah had, apparently, been under a separate pre-existing inquiry related to her defunct LLC's tax filings. My attorney's injunction had simply been the thread that unraveled the rest. Deborah Calloway was charged with 2 counts of wire fraud and 1 count of forgery, related to the unauthorized credit draws. She reached a plea agreement 11 months later requiring full restitution of $117,500, 5 years of probation, and 200 hours of community service. Her real estate agent's license, the one she'd quietly obtained the year before, planning to flip the lake house, was suspended pending review. Richard Calloway, who claimed ignorance throughout, was found to have signed off on 2 of the wire transfers himself. He avoided criminal charges through a cooperation agreement, but was named in our civil suit and personally liable for $40,000 of the restitution, which effectively erased their retirement savings. The lake house deal collapsed within a week. The $91,500 in frozen funds was returned to our business account in full within 30 days, restoring our credit line before our lease renewal deadline. Payroll for 18 employees never missed a cycle. I want to be clear about something though. Not everyone in that family deserved what happened to Deborah. My sister-in-law Pam had 2 young kids and had privately warned me months earlier that something felt off about Deborah's finances. She just hadn't had proof. When the fallout hit and family gatherings dried up entirely, Pam lost her main childcare support system overnight. I didn't have to help her. I did anyway. I connected her with a nanny share arrangement through 2 of my employees' family networks, and I quietly covered 6 weeks of it before she found her footing. She never asked me to. I never told Deborah. That was the version of family helping family I actually believed in. 8 months later, on a night when the temperature had dropped hard and rain was coming down sideways, our doorbell rang at 9:40 p.m. Deborah stood on our porch without an umbrella, her coat soaked through, a single duffel bag at her feet. Richard had moved in with his brother after the restitution payments gutted their finances. She'd been staying in a rented room across town. She looked smaller than I remembered. Older. "Renee," she said, and her voice cracked in a way I'd never once heard in 9 years. "I have nowhere else to go tonight. Please. For Ethan's sake. For Maddie's." I stood in the doorway, Ethan a step behind me, Maddie asleep upstairs in a room with a nightlight shaped like a star, in a house that Deborah's actions had almost cost us. I thought about the door that slammed on my daughter. I thought about the folding table, and the card torn in half, and the 11 months it took to know for certain that our business would survive. "You're not owed a door in this house, Deborah," I said, quiet and even. "You taught me that yourself. I hope you find somewhere warm tonight." I closed the door. I locked it. I didn't watch through the glass to see her walk away. Later, in bed, Ethan pulled me against him and said the only thing that mattered. "I should have believed you sooner." I told him it didn't matter anymore, that what mattered was he believed me now, and that our daughter would grow up in a house where nobody ever got pushed out of anything again. Here's what I learned from all of it. Quiet people aren't weak people. Sometimes the calmest person in the room is the one who's already counted every dollar, saved every file, and is simply waiting for you to say the wrong thing out loud. Family isn't a blank check for cruelty, and love, real love, protects the people who can't protect themselves, especially the 7-year-olds in yellow dresses who never did anything wrong at all. If someone in your own life has ever mistaken your patience for permission, what did you do about it? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story hit home, do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe for more stories like this one, and I'll see you in the next video.